So good morning, everybody, and welcome to our end of session professional development day. I'm super excited to be here, and I feel humbled to have the privilege of sharing some of the lessons that I have learned over my 28 years of teaching ESL. I'm very grateful to have had the opportunity to do a myriad of amazing things in my 53 years of life. And here, for example, okay, let's see. Sorry, give me 1 second. Okay. There we go. All right. No, that's not right. There we go. Okay. All right. So here, for example, is a picture of me in 1995, just a few years ago, when I spent 9 months working at Disney World's Epcot Center. I've been teaching English as a second language for a total of 28 years in the following places. So there we go, okay. The picture on the right is of Chalkida in Greece, where my ESL teaching adventure began. By the end of my year in Greece, I had figured out that I wanted to continue in the ESL teaching field, but I needed some formal training. So after my year in Florida, I embarked on a CELTA course in England. The very first class started like this. A woman waltzed into the room and started teaching us a lesson using Mandarin. I was fascinated by the fact that learning was actually happening in a room where the common denominator between the students and the teacher was the skill of the instructor and not a common language. I was instantly hooked, and now find myself bemused when people invariably ask me, how many languages do you speak? When I tell them I'm an ESL teacher. My answer is always the same. It doesn't matter if I speak 27 languages fluently, which I don't, by the way. I speak one language in class, and that is the language I'm teaching. Why would a piano teacher go into their class holding a guitar? It just doesn't make sense to me. So I loved the CELTA course, and I went on to teach all around the world. I did think about doing a master's in TESOL, but I had another calling. Having had the privilege of being raised in Switzerland, I really wanted to give back. And that's what directed me towards getting my master's in mental health counseling instead of the master's in TESOL. At the time, I didn't see the connection between my master's in psychology and teaching ESL. But now, looking back, the connection is blatantly clear, and the dots connect in perfect synchronicity. Okay. I love this depiction of the human mind because it illustrates what is happening as one is acquiring a language. I show my students this slide at the beginning of each session, so they're aware of what's happening inside their heads as they move through Ola's blocks. Our mind is comprised of a conscious component and a subconscious component. As the slide so clearly illustrates, the conscious mind is teeny tiny. If it ever became responsible for everything managed by our majestic subconscious mind, we would literally be dead in seconds. Indeed, the subconscious mind is where it's at. It is massive, and its power is awe-inspiring. It keeps our hearts beating, our lungs breathing while we're sleeping. It regulates our body temperature, and in less than a second, it destroys and replaces 50 million cells. It's amazing. Do you realize that our subconscious mind is 99% more powerful than a computer? Amazing. Okay, we just had someone else entering. All right. So why am I going on about this? I tell my students about this because of passive learning. When I give my students these endless lists of data, whether it be verb plus preposition combinations, phrasal verbs, count and non-count nouns. I very rarely tell them to sit down and memorize them all. I mean, look at this list, for example. You know, here you go, Carlos, memorize these verb and preposition combinations, please, and we'll have a quiz on them tomorrow. I mean, I don't think so. Instead, I tell them to read the page, ask me 3 questions, keep it in your folder as a reference, and most importantly, saturate your subconscious mind with English input by doing these things. Okay? Talk to someone in English outside of class. Watch a series, listen to a podcast, listen to English music, read books or magazines in English. If you like sailing, find one about sailing. If you find one about basket weaving, then read that. Why? Because this linguistic input will be combined with what happens in class. It will be processed by our subconscious mind, and it will result in semi-accurate linguistic production. Do students need to understand every word in the series, book, or podcast? Not at all. I always tell them to let go of the anxiety involved in wanting, needing to comprehend every single word. I mean, what's the worst thing that will happen if you miss even 50% of what you're watching or reading? Nothing. Breathe. Relax. Enjoy what you can, and then watch the fruits of the exposure. I can immediately identify the students in my class who engage with English outside of class, because I can see that they're starting to develop an ear for the language, akin to that of a native speaker. So, how about those students who are married to bilingual spouses? How many times have we heard students say, my husband or wife, they won't speak to me in English, or when I speak to someone in public, they just start talking to me in Spanish. To those students, I say this: learning English is a conscious choice. Ask your spouse to speak to you in English 10 minutes every day. Set the timer on your cell phone and just do it. 10 minutes every single day. It's a drop in the ocean of a 24-hour day. And the incremental benefits will be dramatic. If someone answers you in Spanish in Publix, so what? Just keep on speaking to them in English. There's no rule book that says that if Jorge in CVS answers me in Spanish when I ask him for my prescription in English, that I have to switch to Spanish. Just keep speaking in the language that you're trying to learn. Is it easy to do these things? Not necessarily, but how badly do you want to learn English? Have any of you guys heard that expression, those who can't teach? Well, here's what I think of that expression. The person who created that abomination of a quote has certainly never, ever set foot in a classroom as the teacher of that classroom. Teachers are tasked with enormous responsibility the second they step into a class and every second after that. Instead, I love what Mr. Van Doren said on this slide about teaching. The art of teaching is the art of assisting discovery. I truly see teaching as a form of artistry. When I'm planning a lesson, I set up my easel, I get my paintbrushes out, and I start creating a work of art. Now, like everything else in life, art is subjective. That's why I have a disclaimer to make. What I am offering you today in this presentation is a veritable buffet of ideas. But like any good buffet, it's not all you can eat, it's all you care to eat. I invite you all, teachers, to peruse the food choices, pick what looks good to you, and walk away with some delicious nuggets of information on your respective plates that will hopefully make your classes better. My other disclaimer is that no students were harmed in the making of this presentation. They have all given me their permission to include them in my talk today, and I thank them wherever they may be. One of the questions I asked you all via email was this. What are the two most important things to consider to ensure your lesson will be effective when planning an ESL lesson? So Greg from Metro West, hi Greg, said that the importance of how the lessons apply to the students personally, that's crucial, right? Morgan, hi Morgan from Metro West, also from Metro West, talked about ensuring the lessons are connected to the students' backgrounds, knowledge, and life experiences. I love these answers. The most important thing in my mind when I'm planning my lessons is this: connection, okay? Christina from Aventura stressed the importance of planning a lesson that engages the students. And I agree, engaging each student is key. And it's hard to engage a student if you're not connected to them. I love this quote by Cheryl Richardson. A sensitive soul sees the world through the lens of love. I always want to know who my students are. On the first day, when we're doing introductions, I ask them how many kids they have, what their names are, and how old each one is. If a student tells me that it's their son's birthday next week, I write it in my day timer, and I make a point to wish him happy birthday on the correct day. Why do I do this? Because it matters. To me, not necessarily, but it matters to the student exponentially. That you, their English teacher, care enough about them to remember when their son's birthday is. It makes them know for a fact that you see them and that they are heard in your presence. They have a place at the table of your ESL class. Now, I'm not suggesting that I become every student's best friend or therapist, certainly not. It is of crucial importance to set boundaries with my students and not overstep these boundaries. However, I do feel that there is a sweet spot one can find between being a strict teacher and enforcing all of OLA's policies while simultaneously gracing our students with kindness. I also love this quote by Brené Brown. In order to empathize with someone's experience, you must be willing to believe them as they see it and not how you imagine their experience to be. I love that. Our students are coming to OLA to learn how to speak English. That's all. They aren't in our classroom to trip us up. They aren't in our class to catch us out if we don't know how to answer their questions. They are simply here to learn a language. For many of our students, learning English is about survival. It's about surviving in a country that may be able to provide them with a life that is much safer and may offer more opportunities than the place they have come from. Because it's often about survival, many of our students get very emotional about learning English, and rightly so. For example, in one of my classes last week, I was practicing the pronunciation of the word school with one of my Brazilian students. Another student laughed at that same moment. Now, the student could have been laughing to himself at how something he remembered happening to him the day prior, for all we know. But the Brazilian student saw the other student laugh and internalized it as someone was making fun of her. I sent her a message on WhatsApp that night to check in and reassure her that she is doing extremely well in the class, which, by the way, she is. She replied with the following message: "Sometimes I get uncomfortable when my peers judge my mistakes." The following day, I started my class with a request that all students be respectful and not laugh at others' mistakes. I explained that we are all here to learn. And even if someone is laughing at the dude walking down the street outside, it can be misconstrued, especially if a student is going through a hard time in their personal lives. After my little speech, the Brazilian student said, and I paraphrase, "For me, English is very important. I'm a nurse in my country, and I want to be a nurse here. I need English. English is very serious for me." That pretty much sums it up in a nutshell. The students are here to learn English. And even if they are attending classes to get a visa to remain in the country, as far as I'm concerned, the only reason they're in my class is to learn English. Beyond ensuring their adherence to the school's policies, which is crucial, I don't have any interest in making a delineation between the students here on a student visa and the others. I have a job to do, and I'm going to plow ahead regardless, with hopefully a soft touch, silk gloves, and a kind heart. One way I ensure to connect with my students is by creating a WhatsApp group for each class I teach. Now, I fully understand that some teachers may feel that they don't want their students to have their cell phone number, and I respect that. For me, however, the risk-reward benefit of sharing this piece of personal information is worth it. This session, I taught Intermediate 1 as my semi-intensive class and Advanced 1 as my intensive class. The name I gave to each group chat on WhatsApp was, don't laugh, Incredible Intermediate 1 class, smiley face emoji, and the other one was Awesome Advanced L&S, listening and speaking, smiley face emoji, respectively. Having this group chat creates a sense of community in the class and reinforces the fact that the class is a separate entity from the world at large. It's a space where all students can feel safe and free of judgment. It also serves a functional purpose because during the breaks, I ask a designated student to take pictures of important board work, such as the block tasks or grammar explanations, which are subsequently shared to the group. I also always send the homework to the group, so absent students have no excuse not to do it on their return. I also share my daily word walls, vocabulary, that day's error correction, more later, and any completed worksheets from that day's class. Here is a screenshot of what a typical exchange looked like in my core class this session. Okay. Here, you see class-related things shared. Okay, there's my error correction, there's my homework, teacher saying thank you, okay, you know, business as usual. Okay, now on this next slide, okay, on the next slide, the screen shows a more personal interaction. Okay, here it is. So 3 weeks, I bumped into one of my students at the gym. She took a selfie and then her husband showed up. So she took another selfie and then posted it in the group. Is this personal? Sure it is. And I totally get that some of you may not care to share your spouse's face with your students. But the reason why I find this kind of interaction powerful is because suddenly the teacher morphs into an actual human being with a life outside of the class, with a hobby, and my goodness, a husband to boot. On top of this, I got to use one of the phrasal verbs on that day's word wall, which was run into. You can see it there at the top. It says, we just ran into each other. I mean, how cool is that? If that isn't the perfect context for that phrasal verb, I don't know what is. So my next set of lessons are about the importance of presence in an ESL class. No, I'm not talking about gifts, although of course those are always welcome, joke. Nor am I talking about attendance, although few teachers would disagree that actually showing up to class is pretty crucial. What I'm talking about is this. When a student walks into my class, they don't just walk in as a physical body. They also bring a whole bunch of baggage with them, such as, my 5-month-old baby kept me awake crying all night. Or, my American husband made fun of me at breakfast when I tried to say something loving to him in English. Or, I just got a speeding ticket because I was running late and I don't want to be kicked out of the country. Or, I have 2 kids and a wife to support, and I might not get a job here worthy of their respect or lucrative enough to put food on the table, etc., ad lib to fade. My point is that we're up against a lot. Our challenge as teachers is to make sure that at any given point during our class, our students are not only awake, but their minds are present, i.e. focused on what is directly in front of them. And that's a real challenge. Just think about how much your mind has wandered since I started my presentation at 9:30. Have you been focused on me the whole time, or has your mind drifted off to what admin has ordered for lunch? Hopefully not, but it could be, right? So how do I keep my students in the moment? I have many techniques that I use to avoid this kind of situation, okay? This kind of situation. So first, I use the students' names. It's imperative that I learn my students' names as soon as possible, whether I have a class of 2 or a class of 15. On the first day of each session, I write the names of my new students on a piece of paper and I stick them on the seats where I want them to sit that day, making sure that the nationalities are mixed up as much as possible. This helped me to learn their names quickly. Also, I never ask open-ended questions. Why? Because it slows down the pace of the class and it allows minds to wander off to grocery lists and things like that. I always direct my questions at specific students identified by their names. Also, people like hearing their names. Why? Because it makes them feel seen. It makes them feel validated. Skeptics may say that they don't want to make their students feel uncomfortable by singling them out. This may be the case at first, but once they realize that this is your modus operandi, they'll be fine with it and they'll enjoy the extra attention. Moreover, when I'm going over the homework, I never ask students for the answers in the order where they're seated. Instead, I jump around the class from one student to another to keep them all, metaphorically, on their feet at all times. Sandra from Celebration, hi Sandra, pointed out a second technique I also use to keep the students present. Sandra said, are the students having fun? Having fun is certainly an excellent way to keep students present. For example, putting students into teams can do wonders to instantaneously switch the energy in a class from non-existent to electric. One word of caution, however, the competition should never supersede the learning value of the target lesson. I'm particularly excited about one of my recent purchases from Amazon. Here it is. I bought 2 buzzers, which are great fun when we review the word walls that I generate during each class. In this slide, you can see the word wall behind the 2 students. The other students in the class are describing a word from the word wall, and then the 2 competitors have to guess the word using the correct pronunciation. The one who buzzes first and correctly gets the point. The winner gets to choose a little prize from an array of dollar store office supplies I bring to my classes, affectionately dubbed Lucy's Store by my students. And here are just some of the silly things that, I buy, $1.25. It's not a lot. Kinesthetic activities are another great way to make sure the students aren't tempted to reach for their cell phones. This slide here shows an activity I did when teaching the first conditional this session with my intermediate 1 class. As you can see, I attached pink index cards to the back of the students, with their permission, of course, using paper clips. Each card had a clause from a first conditional sentence, and the students had to wander around, writing down in their notebooks the complete conditional sentences. If I recall, I had about 5 conditional sentences, so 10 index cards total, with 1 clause on each. It gets the students up and out of their seats, which is imperative in a class of nearly 4 hours. It's a long time. Another kinesthetic activity I did with first conditionals this session is shown in this slide. Here, as you can see in the first photo, I stuck pieces of colored paper around the room with 1 clause of a first conditional sentence. The students rotated around the room, adding their ideas to complete each sentence correctly. For example, one of the sentences started, if you use your cell phone in Lucy's class, ... then students would write their ideas. And there were some, pretty creative responses. Once each student had responded to each of the prompts, I put them in groups of 3 and they had to peer edit the sentences. This is what they're doing in the second photo. It's 100% student-centered, and it's using the critical thinking skill of data evaluation. A third kinesthetic activity I do to ensure the students are present is shown in this slide. Thanks to my sister, Becca. Hi, Becca. She's here with us today, watching from Switzerland. She had the idea for this ingenious idea of using page protectors as mini whiteboards. For this activity, we were practicing the special words that indicate what verb tense should be used. I said something like, I went to Paris 3 weeks ago, and they had to write the verb tense I was using, right? In this case, past simple. The black marker is easily erased with a piece of paper towel, and then the plastic board is ready to be reused for the next prompt. It's a fantastic way to quickly diagnose knowledge gaps, especially in larger classes. And I don't just use this, with the verb tense idea. I use it with all sorts of things, eliciting vocabulary, the mind boggles. You can just really go crazy with this technique. It's fantastic. Alternately, I have the students stand in a circle while I throw one of these little guys around the class, thanks to my mum, who's here watching from France. Thanks to you for gifting me with these little guys. So they're standing around the class in a circle, right? And I'm throwing them at the students and asking questions about the target language. I'll often use this trick when I feel students have reached cognitive overload and a quick change of pace is urgently needed. And you can use this one like on the spur of the moment. It doesn't take any planning. If I see a student nodding off or something, I'll whip out one of these guys, the bee or the doggy, and right, get in a circle. Right, let's go. Boom, boom, boom. And you know, everyone is awake, hopefully, because they're standing, right? So one more kinesthetic activity I love is this one here. I did this a few weeks ago during Ola Life. I lined up the students, as you see in this photo. Yes, I did use the hallway, but I warned admin first. I gave them 2 different role play situations, and they had to have a conversation with the person directly in front of them about that situation. Then the students in the left row had to move down one student so that the next role play, they were interfacing with a different student. The first role play was about this situation. All the students on the left are managers of a 5-star hotel. All the students on the right are unhappy vacationers staying at the 5-star hotel. The customers had to complain about a plethora of things that were wrong with this hotel, and the respective managers had to appease the guests and offer some sort of resolution by the end of the 4-minute conversation. The conversations happen all at the same time, which forces the students to speak loudly and really practice their listening and pronunciation. It worked really well, and you'll never believe what happened the day after the class. My phone goes bing, and I see I have a message from a Russian student who had taken part in the hotel role play. Her message read as follows. I apologize for my message, but I want to say thank you for the last speaking class. We booked a hotel. This was when she had been on some trip. We booked a hotel, but the photo in the booking is different than reality. The room was dark, very dirty, with the smell of alcohol, with wet beds. It was a 4-star hotel. The manager didn't want to return the money. My husband didn't know what to do, but I was able to get them to return our money. And we found a new cool room in another hotel. Thank you 1,000 times. If you ever doubt that what we really do, what we do really impacts lives, remember that WhatsApp message. What we do is important. A final example of a kinesthetic activity I do is also when we're reviewing the word wall from the previous day. I stick one piece of paper on a wall with the list of vocabulary and another piece of paper on the opposite wall with the list of numbers. One student stands in front of the list of words and describes each word to their partner, who then, on the other side of the room, writes the words on the numbered paper. The activity looks like this and works extremely well.
I can't, I need, I love this.
Number 3.
So a string, you know?
Look,
me, I love